This is the Sports Bash Warm-Up with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN. Now, live inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, here's Josh Hennig.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to NFL Franchise Tag Deadline Day. Officially this afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, you will no longer be allowed to negotiate with players who have been tagged for long-term contracts. For Cowboy fans, that includes Dak Prescott. For Bengal fans, that includes A.J. Green. The Chiefs have avoided this problem yesterday by re-signing Chris Jones to an extension. Meanwhile, again, the Eagles don't have a franchise player because despite what many of you may want to admit, Howie Roseman is really good at his job. Josh Hennig here, the warm-up, 97.3 ESPN. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. We got a lot to get to, just 1 hour to do it. It's a Weinberg Wednesday, so Dave Weinberg will join us coming up at 1:25. We'll get into Jason Peters. Dave wrote about that in his Extra Points column over at 973ESPN.com. We'll talk Jason Peters. We'll talk about the news that, as of this moment in time, there will be no fans at Eagles or Phillies games this season. And we have a poll right now at 973ESPN on Twitter. In the light that there will be no fans at Eagles and Phillies games this season, do you think we'll have an NFL football season? Yes, it will start on time. No, or yes, but it won't start on time. You can go vote right now at 973ESPN on Twitter. So we're going to get into all that kind of stuff with Dave coming up for a Weinberg Wednesday. Plus, this hour, we're going to talk about also some of the comments Ben Golliver had yesterday about Ben Simmons. Sixers and Ben Simmons are still in the news. As I mentioned, NFL Tag Deadline Day. And also, Howie Roseman. Also, congratulations. The NHL apparently is picked July 15th, 2020 as the day to announce finalists for awards. I'm not fully sure what makes today that day. I feel like that's a question I should have asked Durso about before I jumped on the air. But they're announcing a couple of finalists for awards, like the Calder Trophy and the Jack Adams Trophy. And if you didn't hear, Alain Vigneault, Flyers' first-year head coach, is one of the three finalists for the Jack Adams Award. Congratulations to him. Although I do find it a little ironic that the three candidates for the award are all Eastern Conference head coaches. You got Cassidy from the Boston Bruins, you got Tortorella from Columbus, and you got Alain Vigneault from the Flyers. So I guess the Eastern Conference is the only good coaches this year, right? I kid. So we got a lot to get to during this hour. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. But I did want to start off the top here. We got to get to today being NFL Tag Deadline Day. And the reason why we have to touch on that is because of the fact that for the Philadelphia Eagles, this is a day that they're not usually a participant in. For many years now, the Philadelphia Eagles have been able to avoid having to tag players, having to go down to the wire year after year. You look at a lot of organizations around the NFL. The majority of them have to tag guys every single daggone year in order for them to actually be able to negotiate with their players. The Eagles are not one of those teams. Look around the NFL. It seems like every single year, teams like the Cowboys, teams like the Giants, teams like the Bengals, all these teams seem to always have to tag someone almost every single year. Not the Eagles. And right now on 97.3 ESPN.com, there's an article where we talk about what is Howie Roseman's perception around the NFL. And one of the quotes I thought that was very, very interesting in the article, because in the piece at 97.3ESPN.com, it talks about what do the people who represent players think of Howie Roseman. And one of the questions was asked was, among NFL general manager front office leaders, who is the smartest? Well, the Eagles' Howie Roseman got a bunch of votes. There were 30 NFL player reps represented. And this representative says this about Howie Roseman. I'll listen to this quote real quick. If I was going to go into the lab and build a GM, it's a guy that can deal with the media, a guy that knows personnel, and a guy that knows money. Those are the three things. Howie Roseman is a guy that I think is very good with the media, from what I can tell. I know that he knows the money game very well, and I've known him for 15 to 18 years, and he worked incredibly hard to learn football and how to evaluate to the point now where he's really good, unquote. That's what somebody who has to negotiate on behalf of his players have to say. And you can check out the full, list of the rankings. Howie Roseman, how he's ranked by NFL.com among GMs right there, 97.3 ESPN.com. We have the full list. But I wanted to touch specifically on today being NFL Tag Deadline Day, because you look at what's going on with the Cowboys right now. The Cowboys, according to Todd Archer of ESPN, is him and his camp of a huge divide with the Cowboys. They cannot come to an agreement, and barring anything monumentally changing, when the deadline hits later this afternoon, Dak Prescott will be playing on a franchise tag that will pay him $31.4 million. And the reason why that is significant is because of the fact that you will look around the NFL. Look at all the guys who have gotten contract extensions. Pat Mahomes, the record-breaking, record-making, record-setting, standard contract extension at this point. Jared Goff has gotten a contract extension. Jimmy Garoppolo has gotten a contract extension. Carson Wentz has gotten a contract extension. All these quarterbacks around the league seem to be able to get contract extensions. But the Cowboys can't with their franchise quarterback. Remember, the Cowboys are a team that's also had to tag guys like DeMarcus Lawrence. It's a franchise that has had to tag multiple guys over the years. But the Eagles haven't had to do that. I know there's a contingent of people out there who look at Howie Roseman and they say stuff like, he's not a football guy. What does he know about football? But yet, the people who represent players, the agents, the representatives, think highly of him. People who cover the NFL have him as a top 5 NFL general manager in their power rankings. The guy was the general manager when the team won a Super Bowl. Before Doug Peterson and Howie Roseman 2.0 came in Philadelphia in 2016. The Philadelphia Eagles were 0-2 in Super Bowls. They have been to numerous NFC championship games. They've been through a plethora of head coaches. In the Jeffrey Lurie era of ownership, Lurie has been unafraid to spend money. He's been unafraid to take risk. They have done everything necessary that they think to win. But the Eagles win a championship, and Howie Roseman still gets questioned by certain people in the fan base. You look around the NFL right now. Look at all the dysfunctional teams in this league. The Cowboys have had this wonderful run of luck, right? They had Aikman, they had Romo, they had Prescott, right? Before Aikman, they had Danny White, they had Roger Staubach, and then Morton before that. They've had a nice run of quarterbacks, right? But in 2020, you can't get it figured out. Why? Because he's a 4th-round pick? Is that what it is? Look around the NFL. The Bengals and A.J. Green. A.J. Green is arguably one of the 3 best players in Cincinnati Bengals franchise history, but you can't figure out a deal with him. Look around the NFL. The Giants acquired Leonard Williams, and then they can't get a long-term deal done with him. How's that work? How's that going for you? The Redskins, I mean, that's just a franchise that hasn't been able to find their way for the large part of about 20 years, aside from a couple, flashes in the pan with guys like Robert Griffin III and others. Again, look around the NFL. The Bears traded up to get a quarterback, and now they had to bring in a former Super Bowl MVP to compete with the former second overall pick, Mitch Trubisky, because they've lost faith in him. Again, look around the NFL. Look at all the head coaches the Broncos have been through in the last few years. As I still scan the NFL, Bill O'Brien traded DeAndre Hopkins for an injured running back and draft picks. And as I continue to look around the NFL, I have a lot of questions about a lot of these franchises. But here in Philadelphia, we have a GM that has been able to figure it out. We have a GM that's doing his job, but the guy doesn't get credit. We don't give him credit for hiring football people like Joe Douglas and Andy Weidel. We don't give him credit for hiring outside-the-box thinkers like Andrew Berry, who is now the GM over in Cleveland, by the way. We don't give him credit for making sure Wentz is locked up on a deal that in a couple of years is going to look like a bargain bin buy over at your local inexpensive. It's like you go to the local retail store that has the bargain bin, and you're like, wow, look at all the name brands on the shelf, and they're all for a third of the price. I don't have to go to the name brand store online. I can go over here and get it. Well, Howie Roseman's doing that with players. He's signing extensions. He's getting the job done. So on NFL tag deadline day, let's give a little hat tip to Howie Roseman that we don't have to go through this drama here in Philadelphia year in and year out that some of these other franchises do. By the way, go check out that full article over at 97.3 ESPN.com. You can see the full thing of what people think of Howie Roseman around the league. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. I mentioned Dak Prescott, and we'll get to your text in just a moment. As I mentioned, there's this whole issue with the Cowboys. They can't seem to get a deal done. And I thought there was a point that was brought up by someone that I never expected to make this point. But Dak Prescott still hasn't gotten a deal done. And Max Kellerman on ESPN's First Take brought up this point about Dak, and I thought it was very poignant.
Why hasn't Dak been paid yet? It's because of that uncertainty, guys. Can he get it done consistently against good teams? Can he carry the team? If you pay Dak and you have less for resources around him, can he still actually get to the point where people say, yes, he's great? Not he's going to be great, not we see the trajectory, but he's there already. Dak doesn't have his money. He doesn't have the record in the playoffs. He didn't even make the playoffs last year. He has more to prove.
I think that Dak Prescott is in a very interesting situation because this is the guy that I personally thought highly of coming out of college. And listen, I watch a lot of college football, so, I'm going to look at guys probably differently, maybe than some other people. And for me, Dak made a lot of sense coming into the NFL. I never thought he was going to start as soon as he did. I never thought he was going to have the success that he did as a rookie. But since his rookie year, he has had moments, but as Max Kellerman said, there has to be a reason why he hasn't got a big contract. And I can't get around the reality that this guy was not drafted as a first-round pick. And for some reason, people are holding it against him. And you think about in NFL in the last 20 years, the last two quarterbacks who were franchise tagged, and they accepted the tag, and the team couldn't get a long-term deal done. Kirk Cousins with the Redskins and Drew Brees with the Chargers. Precedent tells you that in a year or two, the Cowboys may be looking for a new quarterback. Now, I'm not going to guarantee it. I still think there's a way the Cowboys and Dak's people can get a deal done if both sides are being honest. But let's be realistic. Dak Prescott is in some ways a byproduct of his environment. He's had one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, one of the best running backs in the NFL. When he got Amari Cooper, all of his stats and his numbers got better. I don't know if Dak Prescott is a guy who can elevate the players around him. When Carson Wentz had guys like Boston Scott and Josh Perkins and Deontay Burnett out there last year, he found a way to help the Eagles when they got to the playoffs. I don't know if Dak can do that. You look around the NFL at the quarterbacks who you would want to start your franchise with, whether it's a guy like Russell Wilson, whether it's a guy like Patrick Mahomes, whether it's a guy like even Carson Wentz or an Aaron Rodgers, or fill in the blank with a quarterback. I don't know if Dak is on the same level as those guys. Do I think he can be a very good quarterback and win a Super Bowl for a team? Absolutely. But I think the Cowboys are holding that perception of him against him. And I think that's a big reason why today, on NFL Tag Deadline Day, Dak still doesn't have a long-term deal. And I would not be surprised in a couple of years, Dak Prescott has a new home. Because you look at precedent. Drew Brees got tagged by the Chargers, ended up in New Orleans. Kirk Cousins got tagged by the Redskins multiple times, ended up with the Vikings. You kind of have to wonder. Keep that in the back of your mind. Could it be 2022 and Dak Prescott's in a different in a new uniform with a long-term deal? And the second question is, what team would that be? By the way, it might be a team in his own division. If the Redskins are not sold on their quarterbacks, Daniel Snyder does spend money. Just a thought. Get to your text in just a moment, 609-403-0973. Again, I want to remind all of you, we got the poll question up at 973 ESPN on Twitter. Question. Do you think we'll have an NFL football season? Your options, you have three options. Yes, it will start on time. No, or yes, but it won't start on time. That's at 973 ESPN on Twitter. We'll be updating you the poll results throughout the day right here on the warm-up with myself, Josh Hennig, on 97.3 ESPN, as well as Sports Bash with Mike Gill and Hunter Brody coming up at 2 o'clock. Also, as I mentioned, the news came down from the NHL. Again, I don't know why the NHL has chosen today to be the day to announce award winners. I'm going to have to ask a much more knowledgeable hockey person than this, but they're announcing some of their finalists for awards today. Alain Vigneault gets the nomination. I'll just say this real quick before we get to the text. You think about what the Flyers have had this year. You have to wonder how much did Dave Hackstall and Ron Hextall hold this team back in their progression and the revolution in the past. You look at the play of some of the guys on the Flyers this year and how they've grown. And maybe it's just, it all timed out that way. Maybe it was, just happened to work out that way. But you look at where the Flyers were, how they played at times under Dave Hackstall versus Alain Vigneault. And I really have to wonder, was the coach really one of the people holding this team back? Because I genuinely consider the Flyers the contender to win the Stanley Cup. And when the Flyers return to action later this month, and of course you can hear the Flyers games here on 97.3 ESPN, I have to genuinely wonder, if it wasn't Alain Vigneault behind the bench, if it wasn't Vigneault in the guys' ears, if it wasn't Vigneault making the adjustments in-game and during the season, would the Flyers be in this position to be a contender? I'm really not sure if another coach could have done it. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Tom from the Village chimes in and says, I'm not downplaying Howie at all, but how much do you factor Joe Douglas into Howie's early success? That's Tom from the Villas. Well, Tom, I have a question for you in return, and there's really no right answer to this. We've heard the term a Joe Douglas guy, a Joe Douglas pick. Well, one of the guys who we were told, according to reports, was a Joe Douglas pick was Donnell Pumphrey. That didn't work out. From what we understand, Carson Wentz was a guy that Jeffrey Lurie and Doug Peterson wanted. When you look at certain other players the Eagles drafted, how do we really then differentiate what was Douglas and what was Howie? I'm going to go like this when it comes to Douglas. And we know that he's a high-level talent evaluator. He didn't last as long as he did in Baltimore and then get the jobs that he has gotten in Chicago, Philadelphia, and now as a GM of the Jets if he wasn't a great talent evaluator. We're very well aware of Douglas. He is a factor in the Eagles' success. But how we hired him and how we allowed Douglas to bring Douglas's guys like Andy Weidel and others to the Eagles to work in that football operations in that scouting department. So you ask how much of a factor did Douglas have in Howie's early success. I ask you, Tom, in return, how much do we factor in Howie allowing Douglas to do what he did? How much do we give Howie credit for that? And like I said, there's this whole controversy about what was a Douglas pick, what was a Howie pick. Look, we can mince meat and we can go pick by pick and go crazy and lose our doggone minds over that. But the reality is that I give Howie credit for hiring Douglas and allowing Douglas to bring his people in here. I think it's a two-pronged approach. The Eagles wanted Douglas's help. Douglas was part of the Eagles winning a championship. But Howie's the guy who hired him. Let's squeeze in one more text, 609-403-0973. Dan from EHT says, Dak is Dak. Kind of, sort of, maybe, yes or no, great, good, bad. Eli won 2 Super Bowls being that way as well. Well, that's the thing, though. You can win a Super Bowl with a solid to good to very good NFL quarterback. So the issue to me isn't that Dak can't win a Super Bowl. The problem is that I think the Cowboys are looking at Dak and they're saying, whether they want to fully admit it or not, they still might look at him as a 4th-round pick. They may still hold that against him. And that's unfair, but it's part of the problem in sports. People are looked at a certain way. Drew Brees was not a 1st-round pick. He was a 2nd-round pick. Kirk Cousins was not a 1st-round pick. He was drafted in the same draft as RG3. So when you think about it, teams look at these guys differently, fair or unfair, and I think that's part of the problem with Dak. And like I said, Brees had to leave the Chargers, Cousins had to leave the Redskins. Do not be surprised if by 2022, Dak Prescott's got a different uniform on. Coming up next, it's a Weinberg Wednesday. Dave Weinberg. He's covered Jason Peters for his entire career. What does he think of Peters moving the right guard? We'll get into that and more coming up with Dave up next here on the warm-up on 97.3 ESPN. I want to remind you, 97.3 ESPN has teamed up with Seize the Deal for incredibly weekly offers. And this week's deal, I'm telling you, you need to get your hands on this deal. $50 gift card to Dickey's Barbecue Pit in Egg Harbor Township for half the price. They have outdoor dining. You can do delivery. You can do takeout. I love doing the takeout because I love bringing the food home with me. That way, if I have any leftovers, I can stick it in the fridge, have it for lunch the next day. Listen, Dickey's is that good. You want it for lunch the next day. If I love it, you're going to love it. $50 gift card, Dickey's Barbecue Pit, half the price, starting this Friday at 9 a.m. SeizeTheDeal.com. For more information, click on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Welcome back into the warm-up. Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. Back to your text in just a bit, 609-403-0973. But every Wednesday, it's a Weinberg Wednesday. And joining us right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, Dave Weinberg. We got a lot to get to with the Eagles and more. Dave, how you doing on this Wednesday?
Doing well, Josh. How are you?
Doing pretty good. So, obviously, one of the things we will get to is Jason Peters, but this clarification of event moratorium has just come down from the city of Philadelphia. And I want to get your intake on this because one of the designations, and as I read this, I'll quote it for the audience out there. The top of the thing says, the city of Philadelphia's event moratorium announced yesterday does not apply to stadiums or other private property. It covers only events that require city permits and take place on public property, unquote. So it seems like, Dave, they're making some sort of delineation between public events and private entities when it comes to this restriction of people in a building.
Right. I mean, stuff like the Mummers Parade, the Broad Street Run. Those are the things that I guess that they're specifying won't be allowed because of the crowd sizes. But I guess the Link and Citizens Bank Park are exempt for now. That contradicts what they said yesterday. So I guess it's all really kind of confusing as to what they really mean. It's going to be interesting to see, how the NFL gets involved. The Eagles and Philly specifically get involved with the city, and if they're going to be able to work out some sort of agreement.
We know that cities like Baltimore and Jacksonville are a couple that have announced their plans to have like a low percentage of people allowed in the stands, right, with social distancing and temperature checks and all that stuff. But is that still a good idea, Dave? I mean, listen, you've been covering the Eagles for a long time. I mean, just the idea of having a stadium 25% capacity, is that even worth it in the long run?
Honestly, I'm not sure, Josh. You wouldn't really think so. I mean, like the Eagles, they offered season ticket holders the opportunity to defer their seats until next year. But if you have less than 25,000 fans, I don't really see what the point is, to be honest with you. But there really is no home field advantage if you only got a couple thousand fans in the stands. I mean, just ask the Marlins and the Rays, for example, in baseball. I mean, their attendance is atrocious. Same thing with Jacksonville and football. They don't draw very well either. So it's I mean, the Eagles, especially, they're a team who really feeds off the fans' energy and their enthusiasm. They have enjoyed one of the best home field advantages in the NFL. So if that's severely reduced, I just don't really see what the point of it is.
Dave, you mentioned also in your extra points column about the Forbes magazine estimate the Eagles would stand to lose $204 million in revenue if fans were banned from attending home games. I'm not sure if there's any reason except for trying to recoup some of that money. It makes sense because no offense to the fans, but listen, we're seeing a lot of sports right now performing and succeeding without people in the building. So to me, it feels like the only reason why you would need or want fans in the building is just to try to recoup some fraction of that revenue.
You're probably right there. I mean, you're talking about, concession and parking and stadium workers there not as many would be needed. So they'd be losing their at least their side jobs and then in some cases their livelihoods. So, but I don't know. I really think that the fans are kind of I know you can exist without them, but I just think that having them, say the PGA Tour, for example, having those people cheering when Tiger makes a big putt to win the Masters or whatever. Any sporting event really. If the more fans you have, I think the better off the overall experience is. There's just an energy level. Boxing, for example, you don't have any fans sitting at ringside. It's just not the same when you see a big knockout. It's basically silence, and I just don't. I think fans really do have a place in every sporting event. It'd be really sad to see them go away.
Dave Weinberg joining us here on the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at Dave Weinberg19. And Dave, you're someone who has covered Jason Peters for his entire career in Philadelphia, and now he's been re-signed to play right guard. What was your initial reaction when that news came down yesterday?
Surprising. Jason's never played guard in his life. He was a tight end growing up in high school and college, and then converted to tackle with the Buffalo Bills. And I just don't. It's going to be really difficult, especially for a guy who's 37, 38 years old. Is used to doing things a certain way. It's not only just playing guard, but also playing on the right side. And I'm really not getting the point of it. I can see if you wanted to sign him as a backup, maybe as like an emergency fill in case Andre Dillard doesn't work out at left tackle. or if Matt Pryor struggles at right guard, then maybe you have somebody that swing guy that you can kind of plug in there. But I don't think Jason was signed to do that. I mean, he's at the point of his career where he's either going to be a starter or not. I don't think he got any offers from other teams. So that tells me that maybe his best days are behind him, or maybe his money demands were a little too high. But I'm not really getting the value of it. But I know that him and Jeffrey Lurie are very close, and maybe Jeffrey just wanted to give him like one more opportunity to kind of go out on his own terms, and so he brought him back for one more year.
I know that Peters has said in the past, especially to guys like you in the media, that he's like, hey, I'm willing to play another position if they ask me to. They hadn't asked him to in the past, so I'm curious to see if maybe there's a little bit of precedent of his willingness to move and do other things. Maybe if that played into some of this as well.
Yeah, it could. I mean, I guess he probably had to reevaluate his priorities here and his demands. Like I said, the market really wasn't that great for him in free agency, so I guess he kind of had to readjust some things. And if playing inside is the answer that's going to prolong his career, I guess he's going to have to do that. But it's just hard. It's kind of hard to believe that he'd be able to make such a smooth transition. I know he's a veteran and he knows, just Allen's system and all, but, playing left tackle for his entire life in the NFL life anyway, I think it's going to be a really difficult move for him.
One of the biggest things that stands out to me is when Trey Thomas was on the Sports Bash with Mike Gill recently, he mentioned about the fact of, you play so long on one side of the line and switching to the other side. The biggest thing to me, Dave, is the fact that you're asking a guy who literally has played such a long time with one set of footwork and one set of angles, and now you're asking him to basically be ambidextrous and go a totally different direction. I'm not saying he can't do it, but I'm just a little concerned that you're asking a guy to do something that just doesn't come naturally to him.
Right. I mean, it's not just like one side to the other, but like tackle to guard. I mean, what made Jason the great player that he was his athleticism, his combination of power and quickness and agility, and those are the traits that were able to make him one of the top left tackles in league history, really. And in guard, when you're playing guard, you're in a more confined space. Have to work with two players instead of one, with Jason Kelsey and then Lane Johnson. And I just think the transition is going to be really difficult. You even saw it with Andre Dillard last year. Granted, he only had a week to prepare, but he had to go from left tackle to right tackle, and he was complaining all week about how difficult it was. So it's going to be really interesting to see if Jason can do it.
Now, the one thought I did have, and I was thinking about this last night, I wanted to present this idea to you, and you can tell me if it's a good thought or a bad thought. It's all good. There's a part of me that wonders, Jason Peters is a competitor. He's a guy that, we've seen him in Philadelphia. He's got that edge. He's got that, attitude that you want from an offensive lineman. There's a part of me that looks at him, maybe he looks at this as a challenge as to maybe build his resume even more as a future Hall of Famer. What do you think about that theory?
That's a stretch. Yeah, I don't think his resume is going to improve any. I mean, if he's going into the Hall of Fame, he's going to go in based on what he's accomplished to this point. I don't know that 1 year at guard is going to really sway voters one way or the other. I'm not really sure. I guess I know Jason well enough. I mean, I'm not a good friend or anything, but I know him well enough to know that he loves to play the game. And I guess he's just willing to do whatever it takes in order to extend his career. He gave indications all season that he wasn't ready to hang up his cleats yet, that, he thinks he might have like 2 or 3 more years left in him. And, who are we to doubt him? I mean, he is, when he's healthy, he's as good as it gets. Granted, he hasn't been, fully healthy in a few years yet now, but, I think it is, you're right about the competitive nature part of it. He is a very intense guy and has a lot of pride. And, if anybody can do it, I think it could be him, I guess.
All right, I'll take that as it wasn't too crazy, but it was crazy enough to get a sigh out of it. How about that?
Yeah, it's worth a shot.
Dave, the other thing with Peters I thought was interesting is the $3 million in incentives. It sounds like to me that this might be one of those deals where, maybe it's like if you start X number of games, you'll get the $3 million, or maybe like a per game bonus kind of structure. So it seems like also the Eagles, they got him at a price that is actually economical to say, listen, if you work out, it's a win-win for everybody, but if it doesn't work out, it's kind of like no harm, no foul.
Yeah, I think that's probably the only way the Eagles were going to bring him back with an incentive-based deal. They kind of know what he can do, but they also know that they would have been fine without him. He wasn't going to demand a major contract, which you saw in free agency when no one really pursued him or met his demands. So yeah, I think this is like the best way for him to do it, to come back, and if he can prove himself, if he can make that transition. If he winds up back at left tackle, say, if Andre doesn't, start well out of the gate, then maybe the contract will be worth it. You're right. It's really no harm, no foul on both parties.
It's a Weinberg Wednesday here on 97.3 ESPN. Dave Weinberg with us. Dave, let's flip it over to one of the other things you love and watch a lot. You talked about it a little bit earlier, golf, the Memorial. Yes. Tiger, he's back. So what does that even mean, though, aside from the fact that the majority of people who maybe weren't watching golf are probably going to be more paying attention? I mean, what can we really expect from a tournament with Tiger back after he hasn't played since, what was it, February?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's more, I guess, for like you mentioned, the casual fan. I mean, I'm a big enough golf fan that, I'm going to watch regardless. I enjoy watching Phil Mickelson and Brooks Koepka and, Rory McIlroy and all those guys. So it's not going to make a major impact on fans of my ilk. But the casual fan who only knows Tiger and maybe Phil Mickelson, the fact that the Tiger is going to be in it, I think that's going to really pump up the TV ratings. And he's a huge draw, whether he's struggling or when he's doing well. And he played pretty well last year, obviously. So it's winning the Masters. So it's going to be it's an exciting thing for golf. And golf, to be honest with you, golf really needs Tiger. I mean, he's just one of those once in a generation guys that can draw, like I said, even the casual fans of the sport. So the more tournaments that he plays, the better off the PGA is for it.
Yeah, and I think that the pairing for the first 2 days is Tiger Woods, Brooks Koepka, and I believe it's Justin Thomas. So talk about having two huge names, as the pairing for 2 days. I mean, listen, even a guy like me who's kind of like the casual to intermediate golf guy, I mean, that gets my eyeballs going because it's not just Tiger. You're putting him next to two other big names as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a star pairing right there. I mean, granted, casual fans probably don't know who Justin Thomas is. They probably should know who Brooks Koepka is, considering the way he's played in the last couple of years. But yeah, that's going to be really cool to see how Tiger stacks up with Brooks and Justin, because Justin's off to a tremendous start this year. Brooks had a great year last year. So yeah, that's going to be ones that I'll definitely be looking forward to watching it.
Actually, now I'm reading that the pairing is Woods, McIlroy, and Koepka, so not Thomas.
Oh, okay, well, that's even better. I mean, Tiger and Rory are very close friends. They were, both sponsored by Nike once upon a time. So that's probably kind of a benefit for Tiger to be able to play with somebody that, he knows and he likes and enjoys playing with. So that'll be kind of cool.
So, yeah, you got a little star power going at the Memorial. And speaking of golf, I wanted to ask you, Dave, what has been your opinion of the PGA Tour now? Because, it's July 15th. We got about basically a month now of the golf going on, and it feels like that there have been some good competitions. There's been some, some good matches, some good storylines. How has it really played out for you as the diehard golf fan watching these events?
Actually, very well. I mean, I've been tuning in every week to watch, and it was kind of a weird feeling at first with no fans there, but galleries are, because golf is one of those stodgy, button up type of sports where you're not allowed to razz anybody or cheer too loudly. So but the fans really haven't been missed because of that, and it's just come down to the guys playing golf, and they've done a pretty good job with arranging the interviews after the rounds. And the really cool thing is that, as I've heard Pete Thompson mention this in the past, that the fact that they have the microphones out there, that you can actually hear the players' colorful language and their personalities really come through now more than they did in the past. So that's kind of been the the most neat thing about it, I think.
That's the biggest thing to me, Dave. That is, I feel like one of the problems with certain sports is that they don't allow these guys to have personality. Like, I know it's not an apples to apples thing, but, for me, when I was younger, why did people love John McEnroe? Because he was colorful, because he was nuts.
Right.
There's something to these guys, especially individual athletes, that you want to let them have the opportunity to show who they are, so more people are drawn to be invested in them each week.
Yeah, I mean, when you get to that level, everybody's a fantastic player, fantastic athlete, what have you. So what really separates some guys from others is their personalities, and the more that you can get more intimate with them, get to know them a little better, get to know what makes them tick, get to know them a little bit like on and off the course of the field or what have you. That makes it even more attractive. And you're right. I mean, the more that they can allow their personalities to come through, the more entertaining it's going to be both for them and for the fans.
Yeah, I'm not saying the golfers have to yell and call people a jerk left and right, but I just there's nothing wrong with a guy showing that he's human. He's like anybody else. He has a bad shot. He drops some colorful language on TV, and I just think it's funny when the broadcasters say, "We're sorry about that." Like, no, don't be sorry. It humanizes him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Tiger makes out, because I've known from seeing him a couple times where his language can get a little bit colorful, let's just say. So I'm going to see if it's going to be very interesting to see if he can keep that under his hat for an entire round of golf.
Absolutely. Well, we'll all be watching that as well. And of course, this is a Weinberg Wednesday. Dave Weinberg. Follow him on Twitter at Dave Weinberg19. Check out his extra points column at 973ESPN.com. As all guests, he joined us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Dave, appreciate the time as always. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it. Now it's time to hit the beach.
Absolutely. Told you I'm living vicariously through you, okay?
All right, we'll do.
Dave Weinberg here on 97.3 ESPN for a Weinberg Wednesday. Josh Hennig will wrap up the show coming up on the other side. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Get on the conversation right here on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City. Josh Hennig back here on 97.3 ESPN. Wrapping up the hour. Poll question at 973 ESPN. Do you think we will have NFL football this season? Poll results so far. Keep voting throughout the Sports Bash. I'll keep you updated. 36.4% yes, start on time. 36.4% say no. 27% say yes, but it won't start on time. So if you go according to combined numbers, if you were a pollster for some news network and doing some preliminary looking at this, I'm going to say that it looks like the majority of people say yes, the NFL is going to start, but they're split on if it'll start on time or not. There's a huge difference between starting and starting on time. That delineation is a big deal. You're talking about, at this point, 60% of the people are saying we're going to have an NFL season. Over 60%. But they just don't agree on if it'll start on time or not. Keep voting at 973 ESPN on Twitter. I'm sure that Mike Gill, Hunter Brody will have a lot to talk about with that coming up on Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. By the way, speaking of 97.3 ESPN, we've teamed up with Seize the Deal for incredible weekly offers. And this week's offer, this is my favorite offer today. I'm telling you this all week. I'm going to keep telling you about it. Listen, a $50 gift card to Dickey's Barbecue Pit in EHT for just half the price. So $50 gift card for half the price. You know how much damage you can do at Dickey's Barbecue Pit in EHT for $50? I mean, a guy like myself, I could probably buy dinner for the next 3 nights with that kind of deal. Listen, it's right over there in EHT. Seize the deal this Friday, 9 a.m. You can get this deal, Dickey's Barbecue Pit, Egg Harbor Township, $50 gift card for half the price. For more information, jump on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Text board 609-403-0973. I did want to get in a text I didn't get to earlier before we hit the break. Dan from EHC chimed in earlier about our conversation about the Eagles and Howie Roseman. He said, that's what's so great about the NFC East. The Eagles are truly head and shoulders organizationally above the rest. The other owners have dysfunctional teams. But they're all differently dysfunctional, Dan, EHC, and that's the funny thing about it. Like, Jerry Jones makes everything about himself with the Cowboys, right? That's part of the reason why they're dysfunctional, because you have an owner who literally has to be a control freak. Then you flip it over to the Redskins, you have an owner who just can't get out of his own way and hires and fires people with the frequency of a hockey head coach, right? Like, the only thing similar to hockey head coaches being hired and fired is the now the Washington football team, I should call them, because they retired the old name. So the Washington football team, that's going to take some time for me to get used to. The Washington football team hires and fires coaches all the time. And then the Giants, they've gone through multiple GMs. They held on to Eli Manning for too long. I mean, they're just a bizarre situation in general. So that's why the Eagles, their ownership is head and above, because Jeffrey Lurie hires people to do jobs, lets them do their jobs. If they don't do a good job, he gets rid of them. He doesn't just get rid of them if he doesn't like them. So keep voting on that poll at 973 ESPN. Do you think we'll have an NFL football this season? Mike Gill, Hunter Brody coming on next. I'm very curious to see how the Sports Bash goes today. If you haven't seen the picture on Twitter, Hunter Brody is wearing a Pitt basketball t-shirt. Now, as long as I've been working here at 97.3, I've never seen anything Pitt-related in this studio before in my life. So I'm very curious to see how the Sports Bash, with a very proud WVU alum Mike Gill, goes with this item in this studio. Stay tuned.